Gordon, Board President of Sea Glass Theater Company, here to welcome you to another in our continuing series of Spotlight interviews with our fabulous artists. Today, I'm proud to welcome Emily Harmon, mezzo soprano. So how have you been? Have you been well?
Yeah. I mean, it is weird to be, trying to be a singer when the opera world is imploding. So I've been spending a lot of time with my family and my dogs and, trying to just work on singing and do the kind of work that is hard to do when you are working regularly. Like actually taking the time to practice mindfully and focus on technique and not just learning like the next project that's coming up. And it's also been nice getting into some old interests, things that I was really interested in growing up, like piano, that I just haven't had time to work on. And so now, as kind of awful as everything is, it's weirdly nice to just kind of, and
it's a little bit balancing, isn't it? It allows you to poke around at what you forgot you like to do.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully, this is my childhood home where my parents have lived since they moved in here in the 80s. And so they were really generous in letting me move back in. So it's also weird to be moving back in with your parents when you're 30, but I mean, it's been great, having their support and not having to pay rent in Boston, frankly.
Well, let's talk about you.
All right.
Let's talk about when you were young and where you grew up and how you discovered your musical spark. Where did that come from?
My brother and I were both, we took piano lessons when we were really little, and we were, kind of taught the love of singing and music and just kind of everything. And it never really left me. I have always wanted some sort of career in the arts. And music was one that always came naturally to me. I wanted to learn everything about everything. I wasn't actually, fun fact, I didn't come to singing really until relatively late. I wanted to be an instrumentalist. I played flute, piano. I played a ton of woodwind instruments, so clarinet, saxophone. I wanted to learn a lot of obscure instruments like didgeridoo and bagpipes and things that are not practical. But I have always, even today, I want to know everything about everything, and I would like to be able to do everything. And it's hard, and it was always hard for me to settle on a career path because there are so many things I want to do and so many things I want to learn. That was another thing. I really wanted to be an actress. I wanted to do plays and maybe be in movies. But I found in school, a lot of school productions were musicals. And I was like, well, if you were doing straight plays, I'd want to be in them, but I don't know about, singing.
Ja, du weißt es, teure Seele, dass ich fern von dir mich quäle, leben nicht die Herzen krank. Habe Dank. Einst hielt ich der Freiheit sicher, hoch die Name wüsten Becher, und beschworst darin die Bösen, bis ich, was ich nie gewesen, heilig ans Herz dir sank.
And finally, I started taking voice lessons. And again, through this sort of, I'd like to do musical theater because I want to do acting and, it was still not the central focus. But then I realized it was something I was pretty good at. And when deciding the sort of avenue I wanted to take, my voice teacher was a classically trained singer. And so she taught art song and we didn't really do arias yet, but that her area of expertise was more classical opera, early music. And I realized that was, I wasn't a natural belter, and that seemed to be like the trend those days. And I was like, well, I can't belt, and but it wasn't natural to me. So I thought in my head, well, I don't really like opera, but but I can sing classically, and if I got good at it, I could do that. I could act. I could wear the beautiful costumes, have the orchestra. It was kind of, and I thought, oh well, opera is this like perfect synthesis of all these things I really love: the singing, costumes, acting, the kind of stepping back in time, and that's how I fell into that.
That journey you learned. What's interesting about it to me, Emily, is because you had that "I'm going to do it no matter what" attitude. You learned what you were really strongest at. And that's going to take you all the way through life. You're not going to stop learning those things because there are so many things that you're going to come to face and have to learn to stand up to. It's a great way to start a career. Did you go to school in Boston? Was that your whole learning
Yes.
career advanced has been in Boston? That's neat.
I decided, Boston's relatively close to home if I want to go visit, but it's not close enough that I feel like I can sort of carve my own life as a young adult. And yeah, so I went to Boston University for my undergrad and my master's. And yeah, I met Matthew through the opera project program. And, that's, I think, you start as sophomores doing opera scenes and acting classes. And yeah, and I took as many opportunities as I could musically. And the other thing I liked about going to a place like BU was that, it was this great conservatory style program. So you're getting, voice lessons. You had the Opera Institute and all these, great performing opportunities, but within the the kind of liberal arts university setting. So I, at several points, thought about minoring in theater or minoring in like German or something. So I took classes in a lot of different areas, but the training was still, the vocal training and the musical training was still really rigorous. And that's what I loved about BU. And that's why, part of the reason why I ended up staying for my master's.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was a smart decision.
I think so.
It's going to be a good launching pad. It's really going to be a good launching pad.
Yeah.
So you've talked already a little bit about what you've been doing in your downtime. Do you have a side hustle? Do you have something that you do to supplement
I'll pay the bills.
singing?
Well, I've had a bunch of different it's been interesting in the pandemic, with things being so uncertain. I've had a bunch of different side hustles in the past. I've been a dog walker. I, for quite a while, was decorating ice cream cakes, which was so much fun. I love to bake and I love art. I've been a receptionist at a million different places. At one point, early on when I was in college, I was an airbrush tattoo artist at a water park.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of different things, but one of the common threads through these side hustles, again, is that I've always wanted to do something with the arts. I love drawing. I love painting. I took an oil painting class at BU too. That was another thing I couldn't have done at, another school. Reading, writing. So lately I've been practicing, I've been getting into drawing more, and I'm considering potentially going back to school and getting like a degree in graphic illustration or design. Not sure if that'll pan out, but I think, as the opera world is kind of changing, it's likely not, it's going to be less realistic even than it was before to have a full-time career singing and performing, as awesome as that would be. So realistically, I'm still gonna, I'll show you how valuable Elwoods can be. But, if I'd like to have some sort of career where I can work remotely and, if I have to travel for a gig, I can still do something with that. So, yeah, I love design. I love art. I love drawing. I'm learning how to do like digital illustrations. And my dad, actually, he's a writer, and he has a writing group that they meet once a week and they go over their work. So I've done some work for them for like designing book covers for them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And he and his best friend wrote a book it took them like 30 years to write. They self-published, and they're going to re-release it. So I'm going to do their design for them.
Great.
Yeah. So that's kind of I think the next sort of like side hustle step.
What's your most memorable performance?
One of my favorites was when I was in Pittsburgh. I spent a couple summers singing in Pittsburgh, and it was probably the most challenging role I've done to date, which was a mastre in the Handel opera Circe. We did it in English, but it's about Xerxes, the king, and I played his spurned fiance, and so he's all powerful king, and we're engaged to be married, and he basically ends up going after another woman and casts me aside. And so Amastre disguises herself as a man to kind of get her way back into court and to confront him. And so at the beginning of the show, she gets back, she confronts him, and he denies her again. And she has this rage aria, which in Handel is like the coolest thing, because I love Handel. And these kind of rage arias tend to have these thumping bass lines with these vocal acrobatics. And to me, it's like Baroque rock music. It's like da 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 da. And meanwhile, you have to sing very elegantly. And so it was vocally really difficult. But the thing that I loved about it, it was directed by Dan Ragazzi, he's directed at the Met a couple times, and I can't remember where he is now, but New York-based guy. And he staged it so that after Amastre is spurned again, after having made this great journey, she sits down at the table where Xerxes just was. There's a feast out, and we had a rotisserie chicken and an apple and a couple other pieces of food. And he said, I just want you to tear into it and, like rage eat. So I'm, singing and trying to, I think I was in my mid-20s, and I was still like trying to really focus on singing, balanced and, flexible and stuff. And meanwhile, I had to like tear the drumsticks off this rotisserie chicken, take chunks out of it, and then like take the apple, which now my hands were covered in chicken. This is disgusting, by the way. And I'm not vegan. I'm sorry to vegans out there. But my hands were covered in rotisserie chicken grease, and having to bite into this apple that had like the taste of chicken on it, and do this like really difficult Handel rage aria, and then like get up and stomp around the stage with like meat flying and apple juice flying. It was, so it was really challenging because it was like balancing all these things at once, but it was so much fun to like literally sink your teeth into this scene. And it was just chaotic. And, people think of nowadays a lot of people think of like Baroque music and Baroque opera as like stuffy and boring and stuff, but like it doesn't have to be. It's rock and roll.
Consorte la chiamo invan. Misero me, la perdo, e di nuovo e per sempre, o legge, o morte, o ricordo crudel. Non ho soccorso, non m'avanza consiglio. Io veggo solo a fiera vista il luttuoso aspetto dell'orrido mio stato. Sagiti sorte rea, son disperato.
we did the Conrad Souza's Dangerous Liaisons with Boston Opera Collaborative. And they had cast the show, and shortly before the production, I was not involved in it. I had never worked with Boston Opera Collaborative before. And shortly before the performance happened, their lead mezzo had, I don't know what happened, but she couldn't be involved anymore. So they brought me in to learn this role, and it was written, I think, I want to say in the 90s maybe, but the music was not, it's not Mozart. You can't just like pick it up and sing along to it easily. And so it was high, it was really difficult and not logical. So I had to learn it in literally like a week. And then we had to perform it, less than a month later, I think. But for mezzos like me, who tend to have fuller voices, a lot of times we get cast as like comedic roles or older women. But this role, it was the Marquise de Merteuil. I don't know if you've ever seen the play or whatever, but she's a total sex kitten, and she's unashamed about it. And so again, it was a similar thing. It was the challenge, and I love a challenge of learning this difficult music that was like not logical musically, difficult technically, paired with this total smoke show of a character. And we got to wear these beautiful costumes with like these corsets and like kind of modern-ish looking, like, but still 18th century dresses and like super high heel. It was so much fun.
Well, how about, you covered so many of the things I had on my little checklist. How about if we skip to what your absolute dream role and dream venue would be? Do you have a person in a place that you haven't either perfected or been yet that you'd like to do?
Yes. Another interesting thing about my sort of Fach is that we don't get a ton of like leading lady roles. So a lot of singers like me who make careers tend to make them doing like secondary characters, and which is great. They tend to be, musically fulfilling and, dramatically really interesting and complex. However, one role, maybe it's a little cliche, that I always wanted to do is Carmen. So, and I have that there. I've been working on it. Again, in the sort of lyric mezzo repertoire, she's a little bit of an anomaly in that she's, so open with her sexuality, and she's so fiery and, but also there's this incredible tragedy of her, spoiler alert, it's, hundreds of years old, but, she learns early on that she's, going to live a short life and she's going to die. And so she's, but she's much more complex, I think, than, she's not just a sex kitten. She's got all these layers that are so beautiful and tragic. And so that's like the challenge part, is just not having her be this one faceted, sexy girl. It's, and that's the incredible mezzos who have played her so powerfully know how to, make her this three-dimensional woman with this really tragic story. So Carmen is definitely one of my dream roles. But I also, I still love musical theater. So there are a bunch of comedic musical theater roles I'd really like to do. Before the pandemic, or right at the shutdown, I was in a production of Sweeney Todd, actually with Alyssa Click. She and I were in Sweeney Todd together, and it was all but ready to go up, and then the shutdown happened. So a few of us got together and we did a little performance for some students. But so I've covered Mrs. Lovett, and I was all but set to play Mrs. Lovett, but I still have technically not gone on stage as Mrs. Lovett. So Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd is Carmen and Mrs. Lovett couldn't be more different, but those are two of my absolute dream roles.
So that just illustrates who you are as an artist. You have the full breadth of role types that you're gonna conquer and just show us all how beautiful opera and music and performance and the arts in general are. That's wonderful.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do about the Italian?
Later on, when it's dark, take him to some secret place and bury him.
Well, of course we could do that. I don't suppose there's going to be anyone to come poking around looking for him. Well, you know me. Ideas just pop into me head, and I was thinking, seems a downright shame.
Shame?
Seems an awful waste. Such a nice plump frame, what his name has, no, it can't be traced. Business needs a lift, debts to be erased. Think of it as thrift, as a gift, if you get my drift. Now, seems an awful waste. I mean, with the price of meat, what it is, when you get it, if you get it. Good, you got it. Take, for instance, Mrs. Mooney and a pie shop. Business never better, using only pussycats and toast. Now a pussy's good for maybe 6 or 7 at the most. And I'm sure they can't compare as far as taste.
Mrs. Lovett, what a charming notion, eminently practical and yet appropriate as always. Mrs. Lovett, how I did without you all these years, I'll never know.
Think about it, lots of other gentlemen will soon be coming for a shake. Won't they?
What's the sound of the world out there?
What, Mr. Todd, what is that sound?
Those crunchy noises pervading the air.
Yes, Mr. Todd, yes, all around.
It's man devouring man, my dear. And who are we to deny it in here? Oh, these are desperate times, Mrs. Lovett, and desperate measures are called for.
Woo. Here we are, hot out of the oven.
What is that?
It's priest. Have a little priest.
Is it any good?
Sir, it's too good, at least. Then again, they don't come in sins of the flesh, so it's pretty fresh.
Awful lot of fat.
Only where it's sat.
Haven't you got poet or something like that?
Now you see the trouble with poet is, how do you know it's deceased? Try the priest.
Heavenly. Not as hearty as bishop, but not as bland as curate either.
And good for business. Always leaves you wanting more. Trouble is, we only get it in on Sundays.
What is that?
It's fop, finest in the shop. We have some shepherd's pie peppered with actual shepherd on top. And I've just begun. There's the politician so oily, it's served with a doily, not one.
Put it on a bun, where you never know if it's going to run.
Try the friar, fried it's drier.
No, the clergy is really too coarse and too mealy.
An actor that's compactor.
Yes, and always arrives overdone. I'll come again when you have judge on the menu.
Wait. True, we don't have judge yet, but we've got something you might fancy even better.
What's that?
because my mom showed me the movie Amadeus, and that was like my gateway drug, I guess. But there's a scene early on when they're doing the abduction from the Seraglio, and the lead soprano is singing. Constanza sings the aria Martinale Arten, which, is sung by a dramatic soprano. So you got to have a fairly hefty voice that's also flexible. And she sings, there's a scene where she sings these like Salieri says these ghastly scales and arpeggios, whatever. But I thought that was like the coolest thing. And I wanted to sing that kind of music. And so I wanted to be a soprano, and was devastated at first when I found out or figured out I was a mezzo and would never get to sing that. And so for years I was like, oh, well, I'm a mezzo. I'm never going to get to do that cool leading lady stuff. But this goes to show you that, even though you may not be headlining every opera you're in, the options are kind of endless. Mezzos play men, they play old women, witches, sirens. We get some of the best comedic bits. And in some cases you get to be, the tragic person, for lack, I don't know how to articulate it, but and so, I, over the years, I've come to embrace, just because you're not, headlining a show doesn't mean that your performance can't be as meaningful or as enjoyable. And you still, to be successful, need to sink your teeth into every opportunity you got.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thanks.
Well said.